Hello and welcome back to the Talking Leadership TV podcast series. Thank you for joining me again. Our guest today is Donna Jones. She's an internationally acclaimed industry award winner, and she is the founder of Asheville Consulting Group, partnering with organisations to develop organisational change strategies that drive innovation, inclusion and equity. Donna's extensive experience includes talent and performance, customer centricity, tendering, diversity and sustainability. Donna's 25 years of experience spans across the transformation of traditional industries, including transport, supply and logistics, government and essential services, driving change from both the board and executive level to frontline teams. She is currently a member of the Transport Advisory Group and is also the president and chair of the Women's International Shipping and Trading Association, better known as WISTA, here in Australia. Really great conversation with Donna, but as always, enough from me. I'll hand over to today's guest, Donna Jones. G'day everyone, welcome back to the Talking Leadership TV podcast series. Thank you for joining me again. My guest today is Donna Jones. Donna, how are you going?
Good, thank you. And thank you so much for having me, Eric. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Appreciate you coming along. So some disclosure for those watching the video or listening to the audio. I work with Donna through my role as CEO with the Australasian Institute of Marine Surveyors, and Donna in her capacity as the president and chair of WISTA Australia. But putting those updates to one side, we're going to talk leadership today. So want to get started, if I can, Donna, with what are you seeing in the leadership space at the moment that one is a positive thing and two is not so positive thing? So let's start with the positives.
Eric, from my perspective, I guess thinking across my career and sort of where are we at this stage, some positive things are, I think there's a genuine commitment to strong leadership. I think there's a commitment to supporting more women to attain roles in leadership. However, I still think there's confusion around what is strong leadership? What does that mean? How do I be an effective leader without being emotionally exhausted? So I still think there's some support that leaders need around how to be effective, how to be a great leader, but how to do it purposely and sustainably.
Yeah, sure. There's and thank you for that answer. There's a little bit to unpack there, and just out of curiosity, if you had to break down how you support our leaders, should it be done by how long someone's been in leadership roles, so early career, established to end of career leaders? Is it age? Is it gender? Like, how, in your mind, what's the optimal breakup of that? Because I've had discussions in previous podcasts and I'm still not quite sure in my own mind how to do it, because there's any number of consultants and ex CEOs that are out there offering services to mentor leaders or to be a sounding board where otherwise they couldn't get that. So how in your mind would you break that up?
I think that's a really good question, Eric, because obviously as you grow in your career, your responsibilities expand. So when you're first starting out, I think it is important to have an emerging leadership course for leaders who are just starting out, who may be at a peer level with their colleagues, and then perhaps are promoted or brought in as a new leader. I think explaining the foundations of leadership and how to support them into leading, purposely and sustainably is really important. Growing in that career of leadership is really important. And sort of that mid-career where some people feel stuck, as a middle manager and probably are facing burnout around juggling all the responsibilities that they have. I think that's a really important step as well. And I know McKinsey and other organizations have done a lot of research on the importance of that middle manager role and that the leadership components of that role. And then, of course, executive leadership is that next level where you have compounding responsibilities and overall accountability for managers and leaders who make decisions to benefit your team or the group that you might be accountable for. And that's probably a separate segment as well. And also there's a gender component as well that does add a complexity particularly depending on the type of sector that you're working in. My background is mostly sort of heavy industry, heavily male-dominated sectors, and I think layering a gender component could be of great value, particularly for women working in the sector and aiming to grow their careers. The other thing I would say is I think leadership is not like a lifelong journey that someone should expect to be on. I do think if you're a great leader, you should have some pauses in that leadership, time to reflect and sharpen your skills, that you should not expect to be a leader for your whole career, looking after people, because if you're doing that right, you should need a bit of a break and a reset at some stage in your career as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Looking at how you manage a career break and how you manage what your expectations are in leadership roles. So, without getting into any one specific industry sector, I'm often amazed the caliber and quality and diversity of leaders across different industry sectors, and some of those really interesting human beings, much like yourself, have had varied career pathways, and some have said, look, I stumbled into leadership, others actively pursued it, and some were technocrats in their own right and were happy in that little bubble in that world because they didn't have to worry about all of the responsibilities that come with leadership. And then he or she was tapped on the shoulder, and then suddenly they're asked to do a leadership role within the particular business. I've, much to my lasting regret, I haven't thought about those career pauses that someone might take in a leadership role, but that I think, and please bite back if you don't agree with what I'm about to say, is I think there's some risk in that if you take a break from a leadership role and you want to come back into it, if your bona fides before that break are not what potential recruiter might want to see or a potential employer might want to see, taking that break could be career limiting if you want to get back into very senior leadership roles. So I've not often asked that question because like yourself, I've had a varied career, but I've built on it over time, and I enjoy the kind of roles that I do because I can be more selective only because of a function of time and the type of industries that I've worked in. But that's been to my benefit because I've planned this out for myself a little bit. But at no point personally have I sat back and gone, look, I might take a 5-year chunk of a break and do something completely different. I'd love to do it, but if it didn't work out or I got bored and I wanted to get back in the game, anyone who's interviewing you will ask you, well, why did you move away from a leadership role to do something else? So an interesting point, and thank you for bringing that up. And the other one that I think is critical and has been brought up in previous conversations I've had on the podcast is around managing self. And you mentioned a couple of those things, and you've said burnout or burning out many times in the last 8 minutes that we've had. So obviously it's something that's of concern to you, and like I'm in the same camp that how much self-care do leaders actually think about and actually put into practice so that they don't burn out. And I think humans being what they are, we don't see the signs of burnout until there are poor behavioral outcomes. So raising your voice at a subordinate, raising your voice in a board meeting where there are senior people above you, potentially taking that tension home and venting your frustrations and or concerns to family that have absolutely nothing to do with the world of work. So if we can go down that tangent a little bit, how do you monitor and realize you're on the track to potential burnout? I'm not saying you're in that road now, but what do you look for?
You know, Eric, I think that's a really good point. That time for self-reflection is so important. And when you're in the business as usual, day-to-day of juggling all your responsibilities, both work and your personal life as well. And a lot of us have caring responsibilities for, that might be parents, children, whomever, pets, or want to, continue to learn, take studies. It is really important to be able to have that time to reflect. It did happen to me. I've been burned out a few times in my career. from managing really large teams and having loads of responsibilities. You can't do it all. You are one person. Recognizing those signs is so important when you're exhausted or you're not making good decisions or you're not able to focus. I do think having sounding boards a great, I think the mentor word is really overused probably a bit, or particularly for women, let's get you a mentor, we're going to fix everything. Having a sounding board is really important, who is not involved with your day-to-day work, about how to workshop solutions to some of the challenges that you might be facing. You may not always be comfortable going to your manager or executive for that level of support. It really depends on that working relationship. And what I was referring to is it could be a career break, but it also might be to divert and do something a bit different. Or, I left my executive role and decided to become a consultant. I have to say I've worked much harder than I ever have. However, it's a bit liberating not looking after a large team for a period of time. And it doesn't mean I may not do that again. It just means I've deliberately chosen to do something different with my time and skills and capabilities. So I think it is, to your point, around being thoughtful around your approach to your career and continually learning and having a path. So I do feel like, though, to be a really effective manager, you have to have the time to reflect and regroup and manage your behavior and your reactions. And when you know that you could do things better, and that's a repeated pattern, that you do need to make different decisions at some stage.
Yeah, 100% agree. I've been reading a few articles on the LinkedIn, and some of them have talked about understanding your own emotional intelligence, your own emotional reactivity or lack thereof, or too much of in the workspace. And it's something I, again, understood but never gave a lot of time to, because I've always been of the camp that you bring a work persona as much as that exists, and you have to act hopefully in professional ways so you don't display emotive tones at work. That's easier said than
Yeah.
done, and
Yeah.
different people have different situations in which a bad response is triggered by an emotive issue at that point in time. Doesn't make the reaction justifiable, but it's a window into how much do you regulate your emotions at work and try not to make that a guidepost to how you deal with the other human beings, because at the end of the day, people are in work roles for many different reasons, and you may have a love of the industry, you may have a love of that organization, but that might not translate to Joe Blogs and Mary Blogs who are in the role to make a paycheck. They just want to work and go home and be with family and do a million other things that aren't work. So I get where that tension comes in. I'm interested and always fascinated when a guest mentions lifelong learning, because that element of great leadership, and I won't mention those that are on my list, but I have some leaders that I watch from afar because I don't know them, and those that are in my professional circles that I have a lot of time for and look up to as great leaders. They all bring very different things to the table, and asking them, well, how do you deal with X, Y, Z? They'll give you the warts and all, which I can't repeat here, but it's a mix of having people around you that are not invested in the business and will tell you the hard truth about, hey, something's not right here, your health doesn't look right, um, you're reliant too much on going out or smoking or drinking, whatever. Then there's the mental health side of things. And I still think it's not talked of enough, because I think there's still a stigma attached to saying in a professional setting, I have a mental health issue, or there's a battle here that I'm going through. And not that you're expecting support from people that really don't know you, but having that conversation in the work setting is difficult, much like all of these conversations around what does self-care look like and how do you apply it in the workplace. So interesting that you brought all that up, and I'm glad it's a couple of hundred conversations in. I'm glad I'm hearing the same topics. Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet to any of this because we're all in this for various reasons. So let me ask you the following in terms of meeting some of those challenges, and let's go to the professional development side, lifelong learning side of things as a challenge. How have you, or have you planned out your lifelong learning, or has it been ad hoc? And then how do you then translate that into helping others
Yeah.
in that process?
Yeah. It's a good question, Eric. And I did want to say, just really quickly on the reflection piece, I do look at feedback as a gift. So respecting colleagues around me who, peers, colleagues who I work with, who have given me feedback is a gift. So taking in that feedback, positive or negative, and any coaching that people are happy to offer you is really important. So I just wanted to share that as well. That's sort of my view and philosophy on that. And the other part is, yes, I've had a varied career. I have a science and genetics university degree. And then, my career has really spanned across HR, sustainability, telecommunications across different sectors, transport, and now I do consulting on transport projects and sustainability. But I'll say being open to, like, everything changes. Once you're fixed into a certain mindset, life will supersede you very quickly. So my view is you need to have a duty of care to yourself to always be learning and upskilling yourself on the changes that are happening locally within your own community through to globally. What are the trends that you're seeing? And my view on leadership is really about my role as a leader is to support people in my team or the organization through my own personal values and beliefs around being transparent, clear, trustworthy, and consistent. People want consistency. They want to know what to expect. They want to know what their expectations are, so that I can get the best out of them and that they can grow. So my role is to ensure that they grow, they build their career, they're supported personally, professionally, and that they walk away from that relationship with some sort of improvement and that they've learned. So I feel like leaders have a responsibility and a duty of care to people in their teams to get the best out of them. And whether that's to come in and collect a paycheck and do their day job, through to growing their career, learning new skills and capabilities, and moving on with their role. And that might be connecting them through different projects, making sure that, if they want a sponsorship opportunity, that they have access to those opportunities. So for me, that's the most important thing is ensuring that people leave that relationship that we have in a working relationship. Hopefully those relationships continue ongoing forever, but we leave that working relationship with both parties, doing better than they were when it started.
Yeah, it's a pretty positive view of things. Thank you for sharing that. I was thinking about a couple of things on how to go forward with asking them questions here, and I think one of the areas that is fascinating from your response is around duty of care. Now, let's get rid of the legal side of what that means, and I understand what you're saying. And it's often struck me that there are any number of very good organizations that train directors for roles on boards. There's governance obligations and some quite structured duties of care around being a director in a company, but you never see that sort of translated into these are the duties of care that leaders owe their people, and that and it may exist. So for those watching or listening, if I've got this wrong, please, I'm always open to be corrected. But going down that pathway for any leadership position is important. And I think the implication with what you've just shared, which is really good around a duty of care, is as a leader, you're going to accrue benefits and get opportunities that your compatriots in the business, your staff may not ever see or will have to work to get. It's incumbent on you to try and open some doors and open some thinking around what you can do for those that want to progress in that business or want to progress careers beyond the current roles that they're in. So I always come back to this idea that not everyone wants to be a leader, and oftentimes people don't ask if
Yep.
if they'll accept a leadership role, so I'm not assuming for a second that everyone wants the good and the bad that comes with leadership roles. I guess the other area and a question I've got for you is now that you've learnt all this through a varied career, you're very much about the relationship in the organization with the people that you're with. You've shifted to consulting now, and you're seeing organizations probably with a different lens
Yep.
than what you saw it before.
Yeah.
Tell me what you see in the horizon, let's say 12 months out from now, in your mind is the biggest leadership challenges that you see on the horizon?
Mm. It's a really good point, Eric. And I would say, as a board director as well, the board certainly has a role to play in operating as a custodian of the culture of the organization. So, and leadership plays a key role in that, right? So, it's not just compliance. It is about when people make decisions, what is that culture, and the board plays a role in that. I would say probably from a consultant perspective, I sometimes I feel like it's a luxury. So I can just step back and walk in and hopefully offer clients a fresh set of eyes on what I see and how perhaps I can help. And I do provide some leadership training to some of my clients around, and some of it's just the basics and some of it is more nuanced around executive coaching. But I do feel as if people are struggling between, if it's emerging leaders confused about how they manage all of those responsibilities, through to I see the middle manager cohort perhaps being a bit stuck or feeling overwhelmed and not necessarily supported. Those are the two real call outs I would look at around the middle manager cohort, who have a lot of personal responsibilities that fall on their shoulders, along with delivering, performance outcomes for their teams. And then may or may not have received any sort of training around how to make effective decisions, how to give people feedback, how to follow up with them, and even how to role model behavior from their own personal values or those organizational values that they're expected to abide by. So I think there's some support that middle layer absolutely needs, and the organization will flourish if those people are given that support and listened to. I would also engage employees around leadership. So how do people feel about their leaders across the company? How can they be more supported? People know the answers. Employees have the answers. And a lot of times they're overlooked or never even asked what support they need. So actually asking people, how can I help you? What do you need? What does the business need to offer you in terms of support? People will give you those answers.
Yeah, that also is interesting because I think some organizations, irrespective of size, assume that their employees or their middle management is going to come to them and say, I need support. Or they think, well, the team knows I'm here to support them. Well, people want to hear that verbalized rather than just on a written piece of paper or in the company logo or something that says, we support our team. Well, if that's in your culture, then you have to live it and you have to actually say it out loud, because I think people being people and leaders being people, obviously, that when you ask that question out loud, you may not like the response
Yes.
you get back, particularly if big chunks of your team go, yeah, we don't feel supported. We
Yeah.
need more of this. We need more of that. Competition is a driver for businesses to grow, and competitive pressures mean dollars matter, and time and money spent on helping the team, is a real issue. Now, if you get a manager or a organizational leader coming back to you and saying it's just not in the budget to help you out, you're going to be losing people. And that I wanted to come back to this before we wrap things up. You mentioned there about the pressure that's coming into our middle managers, our middle management leader group. And do you see quiet quitting happening more? Do you see people just picking up and walking away? Now, I'm talking here post-COVID world. There's
Yeah.
been that discussion's been done to death, but
Yeah.
obviously we're at the point now where there's been some time between the worst of it, and now businesses are operating in new ways, I guess, some more than others. Are
Yeah.
you seeing more people deciding to vote with their feet and just find a better or different employer?
I think it depends on the market, Eric. I think there's that economic uncertainty that's happening at the moment. I think a lot of people are looking, seeking new opportunities, absolutely. But there is a bit of uncertainty. So um, I'm not sure how confident people feel in their roles and that they may have a risk of redundancy or the company might be downsizing. I think, and there's so many talks of tariffs and impacts on organizations. There feels like there's a global uncertainty at the moment. This is trickling through to Australia as well. So I think that I haven't heard the term quitting for some time. I think people are nervous. And I do think the global uncertainty, we have wars and conflicts happening at the moment. We have the tariff talk. There's, a lot of regional uncertainty. And I think all of that is playing into how people are feeling at the moment in general, mental health wise, and then also maybe from a security perspective at their organization. And of course, we're having an election here in Australia as well. So people will be anxiously awaiting that outcome as well. So I think people are a bit nervous and uncertain around how things are going to play out probably in the next year. So once again, I think organizations, leaders have a duty of care to reach out to their people and make sure they're okay and understand how best they might need support, whether through an EAP or a particular policy that the organization has that could support them.
So, in order to finish this podcast off on as positive a note as we can, Donna, what do you see as a positive going forward in terms of that leadership space?
What I love at the moment, Eric, and I feel like this area is evolving, is around that sense of purpose. We all come to work, get up every morning, ideally optimistic with a sense of purpose that we're showing up to work every day and we can make a difference in people's lives every single day. And I'm not just talking about shareholders and profits. I'm talking about providing support and coaching to those that report to us, to those that look up to us as role models, and that we're making a difference every day so that people can leave work even after perhaps a frustrating day with a smile on their face through that interaction and relationship between a leader and their colleagues.
Brilliant. Thank you, Donna. And on that note, I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I'm always happy to come back when you want me to.
No worries. Appreciate that. So for those listening, this has been the Talking Leadership TV podcast series. Thank you for joining me. Have a great day, rest of your week, and we'll catch everyone on the next episode of the podcast.